Now, welcome to yet another lightning response video where I will once again take a question from the comments and try to answer it in a quick and concise manner. And this time that question comes to us from John Connor, who asked, "Hey Thor, if you could create your own Clone Wars for the sequel trilogy, what would it be?" Okay, so what this question is basically asking, or what I'm pretty sure they're asking, or how I'm going to interpret it anyway, is if it were up to me, or if hypothetically I was hired to make a show to quote-unquote fix the sequels, what kind of animated show would I come up with to do that? Similar to how the Clone Wars animated series helped enhance the prequel trilogy and in turn made the movies even better, you could certainly argue. And first of all here, this would be a much, much trickier task to pull off for the sequels, one I know many will say is impossible and that I or anyone else shouldn't even bother trying, but this is all in good fun here, so do bear with me and have a bit of fun with it. Anyway, it is a harder task for many reasons, not the least of which being most will agree, even if you don't like the films themselves, that the story behind the prequels and all the world building and all of that, it's all very solid if not fantastic. For many, the problem with the prequels is simply the execution of the story, which the Clone Wars helps. However, with the sequels, the problem is the story. It feels very disjointed overall, like, multiple different writers came in with completely different ideas or visions or directions for the story. And so in order to fix the sequels, you have to fix the story rather than just enhance it or elaborate on something like the Clone Wars did by elaborating on the war itself. And speaking of that, whether by design or coincidence, the prequels did already have the perfect idea for a show sort of built right into them. They have a 3-year gap in the story, or between episodes 2 and 3, where again, an entire war takes place that essentially involves all of our main characters from the movies. But the sequels don't have any sort of gap like that, nor any sort of major galaxy-spanning event to elaborate on. Episode 8 takes place literally right after 7, and it's not really implied that much takes place between 8 and 9 other than the First Order expanding or tightening its hold on the galaxy while the Resistance grows slightly in size and strength and Rey trains a bit with Leia to be a Jedi. And though, sure, you could maybe come up with something in that time period that helps the story, it isn't, though, going to be able to really address what is the major sticking point with the story for most, that being the Last Jedi and everything with Luke. For that, to make that maybe somehow work, to make people believe or buy into the breaking of Luke Skywalker, which, yeah, I know some just never will, or it can't be fixed in the minds of many. Either way, assuming this is what I was, again, hired to try and do, I think you'd absolutely need to go back to when Luke is first establishing his Jedi Order and starts training his new students, including, of course, Ben. And so what my animated show would be about, or how it would start, is it would begin with Luke and Ben, as well as Lor San Tekka, the guy from the start of The Force Awakens, in case you've forgotten about him. It'd be them sort of traversing the galaxy looking for new students, as well as any and all Jedi knowledge or artifacts that had escaped the Empire's destruction. Which would then mean everything from episodes that were Indiana Jones-style temple exploration to them having to deal with less than savory characters who had acquired Jedi artifacts, as well as them from time to time running into people who simply need the help of a Jedi, which would lead to some kind of moral dilemmas for them about just how much they should or shouldn't get involved in certain situations or what side they should take in a certain conflict. Which would also tie into one of the overarching themes of or issues in the show, which would be Luke's uncertainty about what his Jedi Order should look like exactly. This then would be, you could say, exacerbated by an inability to commune with the Force Ghost to help guide him. We'd learned something was preventing them from reaching out to Luke, but he cannot figure out what it is, which would be part of the reason why they're searching for ancient Jedi knowledge. He wants to know why he still feels some sort of disturbance in the Force. All in all, this would mainly be about establishing the relationship between Ben and Luke, showing how close they get, as well as introducing and allowing us, the audience, to get to know his new students. We'd also be left wondering which students will ultimately side with and go off with Ben and why they will, and which ones are dead and burning in the temple. Because as you may remember, Luke said in The Last Jedi that half his students went off with Ben, while the other half were killed. And yes, I realize there is a comic book series, The Rise of Kylo Ren, that shows that's not exactly the case or what happened at all, that no students went with Ben, but a few students went after him after the temple was destroyed by someone, probably Snoke, it's not made exactly clear. Either way, we'd just kind of ignore those comics, which doesn't seem to be a problem that Lucasfilm has, ignoring comic books, I mean. Anyway, as I was saying, the idea would be to see Luke and Ben grow closer, and where Luke is very much helping kind of shape and mold him into someone who is going to take over the Jedi Order someday, until Grogu is thrown into the mix in Season 2, that is. Because I would have him come back to Luke after, well, whatever the Mandalorian does with him. In fact, if I were calling the shots, which I am in this hypothetical situation, I'd have that show set up his eventual return to Luke in the end. And so after Grogu eventually comes back to Luke, Luke realizes that Grogu is of course going to outlive Ben, and that maybe it's a good idea to help prepare him to lead the Jedi Order. Plus he's starting to see signs that maybe Ben isn't going to be quite the Jedi he originally thought he was going to be, that doubts are starting to creep in. This favoritism towards Grogu then leads to jealousy out of Ben, which compounds into Luke having even more doubts about Ben. We then see a sort of fracture amongst the students, with some kind of secretly siding more with Ben. This is all then what opens the doorway for Palpatine or Snoke, who, yeah, kind of one and the same, to start turning Ben's mind, and it all builds up to, of course, that fateful night in The Last Jedi where it all falls apart. And that, in a nutshell, is my basic idea for what I would do with an animated show to try and, again, quote-unquote, fix the sequels. And I say in a nutshell because obviously there would be a lot more nuance to the story. It wouldn't be quite so blunt and in your face. Not to mention there'd have to be more to it than that in general, especially with it being animated, which tends to imply the audience will expect a certain amount of action. I may even sort of rework the Knights of Ren, who have been featured in many comic books at this point, and kind of turn them into a sort of enemy for the Jedi at this point in time. I don't know exactly what I'd do with them, but I've always felt there was a ton of potential with them after seeing them in The Force Awakens that just never got realized. We'd also, for better or worse, again with this being animated, we'd need a reason for conflicts and battles and for Jedi to have to use their lightsabers from time to time. I also think it'd be interesting to explore a bit of the Jedi's relation with the New Republic. We could absolutely bring Leia in from time to time, asking Luke for help with Republic problems, and Luke being kind of reluctant to get too involved with the Republic's doings, wanting to help Leia and knowing the Jedi do want to or should protect the Republic, that they did it for 1,000 generations before everything fell apart in the prequels. I also think the show could, or maybe should, explain the whole somehow Palpatine has returned thing that maybe kind of like the Bad Batch is doing with its Crosshair episodes. We could have some sort of offshoot episodes from time to time that show things from the side of the Sith Eternal, maybe via some secret former apprentice of Palpatine that Luke encounters at some point. I don't know, I'd have to figure something out for that, but certainly we'd probably want to explore the somehow Palpatine has returned line. Either way, again, just an outline or some basic ideas here. Lots more would have to be figured out to really get this thing to work, for it to be turned into an actual series that has, something you can do with episodes week in and week out. But this is something in theory that I think could work and help make sense of or help fix the story of the sequels. And again, this is all in good fun, not me trying to in any way pitch an actual show or something. The sequels are always going to be probably a sore spot no matter what Lucasfilm tries to do to try to fix them. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to either tell me what you think of my idea or tell me what your idea would be. Either that, or you can ask a question for a future lightning response video. Just start your comment off with, "Hey Thor," and then ask away. Whatever the case may be, leave your comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.